So it's a new year, 2022. I can't believe how fast time flies. And today we're going to be talking about how you can set yourself up for success in this new year. And it's mostly going to be a review of my own last year. And the reason is because every year for my blog and my podcast, but mostly my blog, I'll do like some type of article uh, that's self-development focused, inspirational, actionable on how you can set yourself up for success in the new year because New Year's resolutions are just generally big for a lot of people. And unfortunately, most people fail to achieve them by like February. And so that's been a running theme of how to stop that from happening for my blog readers and podcast listeners. And this year I wanted to do things a little differently and focus a little less on that and some of those tips and more so on my own last couple years in review in a concise manner but also an entertaining, hopefully informative manner. And we're going to touch on some main points here and maybe by illustration show you where I failed, where I could have improved, where I actually did pretty well. So I guess first and foremost, we'll start with these some of the biggest things these last 2 years for me. And first off, I'm really excited to do this. I don't think I've ever done it in this way for a while, where I review my last year. And I know a lot of other blogs I follow do stuff like this at the end of the year, and they usually perform well and are very insightful, and a lot of people consume them. So I'm really excited to hear what y'all think. But anyhow, uh, first big thing would be essentially uh, what's happened not just in 2021 but 2020. I'd almost bucket both of those years together, but because due to the pandemic that significantly changed my life as well as many other people's lives across the country, and that affected how we would succeed and do. And I was surprised to find that even people I looked up to, like Will Smith, let their diet slide and then they got very overweight over the quarantine. And so over the last 2 years, really, uh, I'm proud to say one of my successes is keeping a relatively stable diet and exercise routine. And ironically, I was able to do that because I was picturing these success heavyweights like Will Smith, and in my head, or at least my image in my head, was like, these people have no excuses. Whether it's a quarantine, whether you're locked in your room, whether you can go out or not, you have to keep your exercise routine on point. And because of that mentality, I was like, no excuses. And I'm very proud to say that I did stuff that I would have never done a few years ago, which is I eliminated excuses and I exercised at home. There was a few things in my head like, oh, but I have roommates and, they'll think it's a hassle. Well, I coordinated with them and I figured out a time and place that would work, that wouldn't disturb them, and they were pretty chill about it. And so a lot of those excuses fell away. There's also excuses on cooking and, eating healthy, and a lot of things kind of came to a better place thanks to the quarantine because I made it something advantageous rather than disadvantageous. And I know a lot of people didn't follow that route, but perhaps you can follow this story and maybe learn something or at least be entertained. If not, wait for my failures. That might be entertaining. But for years, I've been eating out a lot, and I wanted to learn more cooking recipes and cook more at home and eat more healthily. And there's all these issues and complaints and excuses I made, like, oh, it's too expensive, or it's too complex of a recipe, or a big one was that my kitchen is a mess. Since I shared a place with roommates, it's a mess, and there's all this stuff. Some of it's been shoved and crammed into an already cramped kitchen for many, many years, at least a decade. So there's all this crap everywhere, and you don't know what you can throw away, what you can, and you have to shift things around to find a pot, and it's hard to even find ingredients and find a place to put them. But this was the year that I was like, screw it, I gotta figure this out. So I did, I basically cleared up as much as I could, or not as much as I could, but a reasonable amount in the kitchen. Started learning some simple recipes, and then pushing the comfort zone, adding a couple more ingredients and steps. And I would say I probably added around 10 different recipes to my repertoire, and I cooked a few things for the first time. I made lasagna from scratch with the help of a friend, a friendly acquaintance. And then probably some of the more easier meals I made were I made a Thai fish recipe. That was pretty simple. I made hong sao lo, which is a very popular braised pork Chinese recipe. And I made a bunch of stuff. I think I made a burrito bowl, and I made a sandwich, like a Subway level sandwich for the first time at home. So it was a crazy experience, and I'm very proud of it. I'm not by any means a master chef, and since then, in some ways, I have shifted back to eating out a lot more, but I do have that skill set, and I plan to get back into it and start using a bit more of it in the near future. So those are some of my big wins, and now I think you're probably more interested in my big losses or failures, and then we'll cover some of the medium successes and failures and all this other stuff. So the things I mentioned were mostly 2020 achievements that I carry through to 2021. Now I'm lumping these 2 years together because they were kind of all the same to me. They just kind of bled through. Like 2020 was like, okay, wow, what a mess. And then 2021, it was like, well, it's better, but it's not over. Yeah, people are coming out and stuff like that, and things are going back to normal, but, half the world is like acting normal, or at least half of my local world is fine with going out, and half are still very concerned. So it wasn't like a complete normal, but I was getting out more, going to the gym in person, and things were changing for sure. So, there's more successes, but let's talk about failures. So I think one of the failures, I won't even call it, you want to phrase things properly. Nothing was a failure. It's just a lesson learned. So one of the big lessons learned was around my anxiety and just the whole daunting pressure of the restriction in social contact. Now, mental health and all sorts of stuff took a dip around the world, I feel like. And for me, I guess maybe I need to be more kind to myself, or something else, but there were times where I just felt like I was suffocating because of the lack of human contact. And me being an introvert, it's probably not as bad as for some extroverts, but it kind of sucked, where I was basically just like in my room, and sometimes I'd be fine, but then after like the whole day of just being in my room, and then like watching TV alone, and then after a few TV shows, and just still being in the same room, like suffocated with like nothing but me and four closed walls, I just felt like I was suffocating and so lonely. And like if I didn't do something to interact with others in the next minute or so, then like everything would be all over. And I think the lesson learned was that it's not even a failure. It's more of like what it was a big struggle. And I learned that it gets better, and that you'll figure something out, and everything's gonna be okay, and you're anxious, and you feel like the world's gonna end, but you're still alive, you're not dead, and things are going to be fine. But there were definitely times, and I know I'm not alone, because I think there are other people who have voiced similar things. But yeah, there was definitely times, especially early on, I would say like early 2020, but in certain splotches throughout the year where that would come up, and that was kind of sucky. And I guess the only failure in that was the fact that um, it felt bad, and I guess I didn't always have a master plan on how to address that or fix that or work on that. Um, but honestly, I got you again because it was kind of a success in the sense that after a few days or weeks, all of a sudden, miraculously, I adjusted somehow. And I think part of it was I did what was within my power to stay in touch with some people and just reach out and you know interact socially, even if it was virtually. So I reached out to some friends that I knew, and just had chats on the phone, and they weren't as often as I would like, just because I didn't want to keep reaching out and bothering them, but they turned out to be at least somewhat decent enough. And then, you know, I did a few virtual social activities. I think there was like virtual improv classes I attended, and there was a virtual, uh, it was literally like a virtual digital social uh, games night where we would play like games that you could play multiplayer with various individuals. And I just did what I could to at least get a certain level of social interaction in. And then I would catch my roommate on occasion downstairs, and sometimes I would try and strike up a conversation and talk. But it's so peculiar because different people interact differently to this whole experience. Mental health is very important to me and hopefully to you as well. But I was very intrigued to find that some roommates, one roommate I had was like completely fine with it. Like it was literally as if like almost nothing changed for him. Like he was like, okay, like all right, now I get to work from home, which is great. And then after that, I play video games all day, and it was like, I don't know, he seemed generally as upbeat as ever, and I didn't detect any need or inclination to socialize more or anything, which was crazy to me. Now here's here I am saying that, but I'm also a introvert as well, and generally speaking, like after a few weeks, I got into a groove as well, and there were times where I was just perfectly fine with a relatively small amount of social interaction. And then, like, when others wanted to talk to me, I was kind of like, dude, I'm busy. Or sometimes would get annoyed about it. So it was kind of funny how that worked. But yeah, I think uh, that was something that I felt like was something that was not necessarily a failure, but a big struggle and theme with my last 2 years that didn't pop up often, but did on occasion, and it really speaks to the importance of mental health and so forth. Now, I think of a game plan on tactics beyond just reaching out to people, because sometimes that doesn't work. Sometimes they don't respond or they don't want to talk to you. That would um, then what do you do? I think for me, I think certain things I tried helped, uh, and you want to play with whatever works for you. It might be different, but meditation helps. Another thing is really finding a skill set or craft, sometimes creative in nature, like painting or piano, to really dive into can kind of like calm you and center your focus. Another thing was just going out in nature and taking walks and seeing the world. That really helps center you. Another part of it is sometimes just interacting virtually through the web, like finding ways where you can still interact. And so all those things helped. And for me, I would try and do a mix of all of them. And I definitely was not perfect at it. There were times where I remember I would, even when things were opening up in 2021, I would go to the gym after work, because that was really, since I have a work from home job, that was really the only time I could tangibly interact with others there. And the other people there were surprisingly like not really into talking to me. Like they were, I guess, just there to work out, or they prefer talking to other people. And I struggled with that. And I, in fact, struggled with that even before the pandemic, like making friends and interacting with people when I don't connect with a lot of them. So that was a very big frustration, because I felt like I needed that social interactability, and it didn't always come. Um, and I don't know, somehow, maybe it's spiritual, maybe it's just how I figured it out, but I ended up finally coming to an, I guess you can call it a balanced playing field, where I told myself, as long as you reasonably try and do what you can, the rest is out of your control. So, okay, if those people don't want to talk to you, that's fine. You did your part, you tried. Now you can go home satisfied and happy because you did what you could. And that was sometimes enough. And, I think um, it actually speaks to something that I think I'm currently dealing with. So now we're in 2022, and for those of you who know about my secret travel journey and travel newsletter, you'll know that I've been traveling around the country a bit, and I just started my journey a couple months ago. And now I'm experiencing anxieties around being on my own for the first time, away from family. And it's kind of the same type of stuff. And, I think maybe it's a blessing in disguise that the pandemic happened, because some of the same issues I dealt with during the pandemic are back with me here, but in a different way, because, once I land in a city, I'm not going to stay super long. I may stay a month or 2 or 3, but it's a limited time to really push my roots down and get to know a local community. And I have to fight this battle of not just staying in my room all the time, but also cope with the fact that I do have to stay in my room oftentimes alone, and that can get very lonely. So it's really kind of dealing and coping with that. And so I've learned a lot more about me and about the nuances of introvert versus extrovert, which I now think are a kind of outdated way of kind of classifying people. Yes, in general, I do think I am an introvert, but I am a generally social introvert to an extent where I need a certain level of social bonding for, I guess, a level of sanity or balance. So it is rather fascinating. But it goes beyond just that. I think it's just like new environment, new place, scared, new world. Obviously not new thing. I think thousands, maybe millions of people have moved to different states, cities, or countries throughout their life, but it's still a very daunting and exhilarating thing, and scary, at least for me, because I miss my family, and I'm on my own, and I'm scared. But I think it's also a good point to remember that you got this whole world of people who have done similar things. For me, it's a little bit extra because like I'm not just doing this once, but then each time I move to a new city, I'm doing it again. So there is going to be there is a secret travel newsletter. If you're on my main email newsletter, you can reply to any email or email me and ask to join that travel newsletter if you want insights and journal entries from that journey. But moving on from that, I think summing up 2020 and 2021, I will say this. 2020 was the year where I was like, I'm going to take this lemon and really turn it into lemonade. And I think what I learned is in that year was that, yeah, you turn some of it into lemonade, but you know, I didn't end up being a rock star, and some of those things didn't always pan out. So I did invest into a course by a business entrepreneur that I very much admire called Pat Flynn, and he gave me a lot of tips on how to really turn my personal brand into more of a business. And while I saw some successes there, they were not huge. What I mean by that is I did roll out a couple online courses to help people, but also to make more of a profit and pay more of my web hosting costs and so forth. And while some people did purchase, it was a very small percentage. And despite that being a great validation step, which was a good sign according to Pat's course, in 2021 I kind of failed in really getting any more additional sales from that, even though I did promote my courses to all new email subscribers that came in and all sorts of other things. So yeah, those courses have sat there and really haven't gotten any new customers. And I think part of it also has to do with the impact of the courses. I feel like the people who went through, they may not have finished, and although I asked them and encouraged them to give me their feedback and what could be better, how it could be more impactful, I never got that. And I just feel like maybe the course content itself was not as engaging or as impactful as I would like. So I'm also thinking about restructuring the course maybe in 2022 or 2023. Now, moving on from business, what else was a success and failure over these last 2 years? Well, in 2022, I think, or in 2020, I think my goals were really just around, health, maintaining that, nutrition, increasing that through cooking, and then digital personal brand, growing that, monetizing that, and they were kind of like decent successes, but really not big successes. And then in 2021, we're really getting into it now. In 2021, it was more like those were great, but now I'm on to other goals and other things. I think there's a couple months in 2021 where I just was just like, okay, just going back in it again, going through the motions. And then, I honestly ended up finding a lot of TV shows that I watched and binged. Kind of, a lot of it was in 2020 as well. I got really into Pokemon card collecting, which I still am. And it was more kind of semi-investing, but kind of a hobby thing as well. And then in 2021, I think I just found a new hobby. When you can't go out to go on a hike or anything, I would never go out to party or bars or anything, but I would go on hikes or go out in nature, or I guess more activities, you could say. When you had to do less of those or none of those, I guess I unconsciously ended up spending a lot of time watching TV, and I found a lot of really cool shows that I found really engaging, like The Walking Dead, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, I already finished Game of Thrones, but shows like that, Rick and Morty, and I rewatched certain anime. I rewatched Attack on Titan, And I think through it all, um, that was arguably a lesson learned in the sense that if you let it slip, you're going to let TV and generally unproductive activities take up too much of your time. And while I still got a lot done for my personal brand and my job and everything, the amount of time I spent on TV did start to uptick a little too much sometimes. And I think we're talking sometimes 2 or 3 hours a day, or sometimes four hours on the weekends, 4, 5, maybe 6. So it was a lot of TV, and I think that's something you just got to keep in check. Not saying you have to reduce it to 0, but keep it within a reasonable range. And I know for some that's not a big deal, but to me it's starting to push the line. And you also got to realize that uh, yeah, I know some people, really normal people who have good jobs and do well in their jobs, who watch that much TV, if not more, and have revealed that to me even pre-pandemic. But in general, it's just yeah, something you got to keep in check. The other thing with 2021 was, I think that was a win for me at least, is the whole travel journey. Now, some of my email subscribers have told me that they want me to keep this separate from my main blog. So maybe I won't talk too much about this, but I think it does relate to inspiring people and personal development. So I feel like it's worth including here. But that was the year where I was really like, man, I'm getting old. I'm almost going to be uh, in my like 30s, and then like if I keep this up, I'm just gonna die in my hometown where I was raised, and it's pretty boring here. It kind of has been for a while. There's like minimal trails and parks, and I've been and seen everything in this smallish town area and nearby areas. And I was like, this is the time for me to go out and see the world and see different things. So I think that was a success because essentially I got a new job. It was remote. It allowed me to move, and I'm on this adventure. The first stop was New York City, and I think I squeezed the juice out of that city. I went to a lot of the top recommended food places, but I also learned a lot about myself along that journey, and I learned like what really mattered and what didn't for choosing the city long term. And one of the things I learned was like, yeah, all that fancy tourist stuff and flashy stuff is fun, but really uh, not necessary. That gets old after a while. It's really just about the basic things, having fun social activities nearby, friends you can make, uh, different things that you see, like different parks nearby. It didn't have to be some flashy thing like going to the Statue of Liberty. It was more of those core things around just a general good life. Having a place nearby I can exercise and be healthy, a place where I could get my groceries, a place where I can socialize and make friends and meet people, a place nearby with nature. Those are the things that matter, not, oh, I'm going to one of the best steakhouses in the area. So that was a success for 2021. And when you really sum it all up, those were the big blocks of successes and failures throughout the last 2 years. Obviously, there's other small nuances and things here and there that I've done differently, but those are the big ones. And I guess the last one I would lump into that is the extra effort I've been putting into my YouTube channel. If you've been watching the last 5 videos I've put out on YouTube, you can tell I've noticeably put in like 10 to 100 times more time and effort into each of those videos and the editing and the thumbnails than I ever have. And the reason being is because I really wanted to make 2022 and arguably the tail end of 2021 the year where my videos took off and I got more than like 17 views per video. So I really doubled down on that this year, which I'd never done before, and we'll start to see if I bear any fruit from that. But that's another big change that I think a lot of it, the motivation, if you're looking for how I was motivated to do this, comes from just being kind of fed up of years and years of no growth or the same old, same old. So if you're looking for another motivation, sometimes you just got to learn the hard way and be like, I am sick of the same thing year after year. And the comfort zone is good for some. There's a lot of safety and happiness that comes from being in the comfort zone. And even as I'm recording this now, I'm not in my comfort zone. I am far off from it because I'm in a new environment, new city, and all this crap. But sometimes if you veer too much on the spectrum of too much comfort, it gets so boring and stale and repetitive that you're almost like begging for something different. And that was it for me, and I've seen others who just kind of recoil and like are too fearful or just like it enough that they stay in their comfort zone. And it's different for different people, and I think for me, I just lived in it for so long that it happened. I mean, my YouTube channel has been around since 2008, I believe, and there's almost 2,000 videos on it. And I was just so much in the comfort zone of not using Photoshop or video editing and just posting unedited videos. But at some point, I got fed up with just having 19 views per video and one negative comment. So I want to keep this short. I'll cut it off here. If you want a part two, I can talk about this for hours. But those are my thoughts for these last 2 years in review. Hopefully they were helpful and at least entertaining.